along along with my other colleagues, my pillars. We have Miss Lane, Miss Betty, Miss Arissa, Miss Bethany. Who else I see on here? Anybody else I'm missing? We have Miss Beth. Um, Anybody I'm missing? So we are so excited and delighted to have our guests here tonight, and I want to open up with them. First of all, we're gonna open up with Mr. Peter. The question on the floor is give your give your thoughts on our election of from Saturday, from the governor all the way down. Let's give us a broad thoughts from your mind to our ears. Then we want to act the same with Miss Anatra, and the same with Miss Britt. Then we're gonna come back and ask questions. So take your time, explain to us, because all of us is in our feelings. I'm the main one in my feelings right now, so I need you to calm me down.
Well, Valerie, I'm in my feelings too, so I don't quite know if I'm going to be the one to be able to calm you down. Let's see here. How do I, I mean, I don't think there's any way to phrase it other than to say that it was pretty disastrous in a lot of ways. Starting with overall voter turnout, didn't even get to 36%. And I think that the only reason it even got that high was because some of these far right super PACs spent millions and millions of dollars supporting candidates around the state. And we saw that the turnout that did happen was overwhelmingly among the voters who are, Trump supporters and, similarly Jeff Landry supporters. We saw in the legislature lots of, even on the Republican side, we saw lots of races where it was a relatively moderate Republican versus a relatively extreme Republican. And the relatively extreme Republican won almost every one of those races. I think what it shows is not only is that, I think voters, I don't think apathy is the right word. I think it's that voters feel maybe and probably rightfully so, like they don't like their voice. I don't want to say rightfully so. I think they feel beaten down a little bit, that the moneyed interests have so much power, and that if you're just a regular person, it can feel overwhelming. And what we saw was that the moneyed interests who did pump millions of dollars into this election, again, in support of far right candidates, were the dominant voice. So the results, again, yeah, so I see Raymond's comment. So I guess what I'll say is this. There's no other way. There's nothing to say about the results other than they were pretty disastrous. If you're a justice-minded person, and that's just, we need to be clear about that, right? Like, I don't think it helps anybody to try to put some sort of a positive spin on that in terms of what the results were. But that doesn't mean that we're hopeless. In fact, I think that it opens up some hope in a different way than what we've maybe seen for the past several years. So the first thing and the most immediate and short-term thing is that we do have runoff elections. There are, I believe, 20 legislative seats that are going to runoffs. We have some parish president seats and other council seats, things like that are going to runoffs. So it's not like we're done for this season. And I think a lot of people might think that, right? Because most people do pay attention to that top of the ticket race, and they don't necessarily think through the next step, which is that we do have another opportunity to make things better. So for those of you who are on here and you're like, you're of a mind like Valerie and myself, where you're feeling, let's say, about the outcome, please don't give up hope, short-term or long-term. Short-term, there's something we can do in less than 5 weeks to try to make things a little bit better. And because it's not, because the seats have now been narrowed down, we're not looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 races, of the 20 that are legislative seats that are going to runoffs. There might only be 1 or 2 or 3 that you find particularly interesting or that are in your area. So find those, see if there's something you can do. If you don't live in one of those districts, do you know people in that district? If you, there are going to be some folks you can maybe plug in with to help do some voter education and turnout. On a long-term basis, what I would say the outcome of this weekend's election does that gives me hope is we get to kind of tear the MFR down and start all over again. We get to, sorry, I didn't want to use I used a little shorthand for a swear word there. I didn't want to go too blue. We have a chance to imagine a different approach. I think it's clear that and this isn't just the Democratic Party, that in a lot of ways the Republican Party, even internally, is broken in a lot of ways. You had these relatively moderate, not even that moderate, like really, I think what we might have considered 10 or 20 years ago, pretty far right-wing candidates who were considered too moderate and were being pushed out because they were quote unquote too moderate. So I think what it shows us is that we've come to a bit of a breaking point, and that there's an opportunity to reimagine the approach to politics. I don't want to say reimagine politics. I don't think that we're going to all of a sudden have a substantial third party. I mean, I do think we're going to be looking at this through the lens of Democrat and Republican, but in terms of how whatever party you're a part of, I would imagine most of the people on this call are Democrats or Democrat leaning in some way, even if they don't identify that way. So how do you reshape and reimagine the political party that you're a part of, and how do you become involved in that? I want to answer your question really quickly. Yes, I'm sure that they will be funding the runoff in a similar way. Does not mean that they're guaranteed to win, but it's just something to be aware of. I'll close my opening here on a personal story that has helped me understand politics and how things work. So I got into politics as a profession. It was something of a mid-career switch for me. I didn't get into it until my early 30s. So I had about a 10 or 15 year professional career before that. During those 10 to 15 years, I was always paying very close attention to politics. I was a daily newspaper reader. I had studied, politics in college and school and all that. So it's something I was very interested in, but it wasn't something I was doing professionally or even often like volunteer work. And while I was in that other profession and interested in politics, I always had this idea in my head that there are professionals in the political world. They know what they're doing. They're working at it. They have the answers. And, I'm just going to kind of go about my life and trust that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, or that they know what they're doing, right? And then just shifted into this business, because it is a business like any other in a lot of ways. And, started really getting deep into it. And I started out as a community organizer, and then started working on campaigns, and now have gotten to a point where I run my own political advocacy organization. I also work on this political season, this election season, I'm running the statewide campaign for the Louisiana AFL-CIO for the unions in the state, right? So have gone through sort of the lowest rung of the political world up to more senior positions, and I deal with a lot of politicians and political parties and all that. And so what I've learned in that time is that assumption that I had when I was in that previous position about there being people inside the game, professionals who know what they're doing, who have all the answers, I was completely wrong. Nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody is just trying. And if you see somebody who tries to act like they know what they're doing, know that they're more full of it than anybody else, okay? Nobody has the answer. Nobody knows the right way to do this. And so for you as an individual or you as an organization, there is a lot of room to reshape and reimagine politics and how it works. And so, you know, that's something for each of us as individuals and each organization to do for themselves. But I would just urge you to throw out any of those ideas you might have of this is an impenetrable closed room, or, you know, the people who know everything are sitting behind, you know, sitting in some back room and know how it's done. Nobody has any clue what they're doing. And so even if you feel like you don't know much, you probably know, you know, in a lot of ways just as much as some people who do this professionally. So that's what I would say is some hope, is that we can read, you know, we'll tear it all down, start all over again, and come up with something hopefully better and more effective.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that. Next, Miss Antrim. Okay, give us your thoughts about after the election, where we go from here, your opinion, what you hear out there on the street. Give us some thoughts. Calm my nerves down. Cause Peter tried, but Peter ain't doing it. I'm still right here. I'm right here. Just calm me down. But I do thank you, Peter, for that. And Netra, give us some information that we can feed off of.
Sure. I'm sorry. I can't calm you down either. I'm worked up. I don't have too many optimistic things to say. This one was a hard one for me. And I've covered politics and government in Louisiana, South Carolina, Missouri, and Texas for, I'm telling my age here, but for like 25 years. I was floored by this. I really believe that Shawn Wilson should have been able to give, at least make it to a runoff, right? And so everyone is just blown away that didn't happen. And everyone wants to come up with all of these reasons why, right? So it was Black voter turnout was too low, or it was the Democratic Party didn't put enough oomph behind the Wilson campaign. I offer that it is everything. It was all of that and everything in between, right? So what do? I think this is a good time for us as a community, for organizations like this one, and for the people who are involved in them to really begin to look at what's happening around us from a real critical standpoint. This election did not start a month ago. It definitely didn't start with early voting. This election should have been top priority for voters, for elected officials, for people within various parties across the board who had a stake in the outcome. We should have been talking about this last year this time. But do y'all know what we were talking about in New Orleans last year this time? Remember? We were talking about a recall.
Yes.
We were talking about, you know, for the last year, we've been talking about either a recall or the Catawba or a police search, everything but this extremely important statewide election. And of course, let me go back real quick to piggyback off of a couple of things that was already said. All hope is not lost, right? In addition to those legislative seats that are still open, there are still 3, if I'm not mistaken, 3 statewide seats that are still open that need to be decided in a runoff: Treasurer, Secretary of State, Attorney General. And all 3 of them have, for, you know, an organization like Justice and Beyond, if you're looking for a more progressive candidate. All three of them have candidates that are more progressive than, let's say, the Republican alternative. So let's not lose sight. That's a little bit of hope, a little bit of light at the end of this tunnel, again, in a short order. In a long order, in the long term, we have got to figure out and be more discerning where we turn our attention and our time. You know, like I say, we should have been talking about this election a year ago. We allowed ourselves to be diverted. We allowed subterfuge to come in the way and make us think something was more important. The numbers tell a story, and they're not all out yet because I've looked at them. So we haven't gotten a breakdown of voters by race or anything like that. But what I can tell you, just from I've been able to discern preliminarily, there were roughly 36,000 more people in 2019, October 12th, 2019, the 2019 primary, 36,000 more votes John Bel Edwards got 4 years ago than Sean Wilson was able to get in Orleans Parish. John Bel Edwards got some 86,000 votes in Orleans Parish. Sean Wilson was able to get somewhere around 50. You look at a place like East Baton Rouge Parish, which is again another largely Black, largely Democratic stronghold. John Bel Edwards got around 84,000 votes in 2019, October 12th. And Sean Wilson got roughly 42,000 on Saturday. So we can't deny that it was definitely an issue of people not showing up. Now, again, what is the reason behind that? That's the part we got to figure out and fix. Democrats didn't put enough and money behind this campaign. People are, and again, I don't like to use the word apathetic as well. People are tired. They really begin to feel like it doesn't matter. I'll tell you what I think might be this is gonna sound rough, y'all. What might be the good thing in the long run? Let me tell you something. If you're progressive minded in Louisiana, the next 4 years will be hell for you. If that don't mobilize folk, I don't know what will.
That's right.
So
That's right. That's right.
Maybe the next 4 years will give us a chance to figure it out. The bed we're gonna have to lay in for the next 4 years will be hard. We better do some tossing and turning and get it together. So I can't give you much more hope than that. I don't know.
That's all right. We're glad you gave us that. Next, we want to hear from Miss Brent. Who's she? Yeah, there you go. Now she can give us an inside scoop.
Oh, I'm about to spill all the tea on you guys. I've just been biting my tongue, feeling every word that's come out of everybody today. You know, when you look at the numbers, 550,000 people decided the fate of 5 million people. And that's just at like the governor's level. I will say, as a first-time candidate running, I was shocked to see the disorganization within the Democratic Party. It's basically being run like a sorority. Like it's bad. It's really bad. I'm actually sitting at Lindsay Cheek's house right now, and the level of incompetence is really something that could be worth bringing a lawsuit over. I mean, the Democratic Party didn't even get a statewide ballot out for the statewide candidates, you know, like a uniform ballot. Like Sean Wilson is missing money. Like the level of fundraising that they did for Sean Wilson in comparison to what they did for John Bel Edwards is abysmal. Like this was an archetypal battle between Trump versus Obama. This was our Louisiana Trump versus Obama. And I walked away from this experience feeling like the Democratic Party is run in such a way you would think it was like controlled opposition in terms of how incompetent the entire institution is run. So that's just my first reflection, you know, but I will say that I personally, you know, as a candidate that did not win in my district, the voter turnout was insane. I mean, there are 100,000 people in this particular Senate district, 70,000 registered and 28,000 voted. And you know,
Mhm.
the far right MAGA extremists, you know, right to life demagogue. That's this President pro tempore person who's in bed with oil and gas and the Louisiana Landowners Association and in the pocket of lobby. I knew that she was going to get her 20,000 that she's always gotten, but I did not anticipate that the voter turnout on our side would be so abysmal. And I'm just wondering where everyone is at. There was not enough strength in the messaging about how critical this is. I felt as a woman that was really wanting to advocate for what our state has done to women with this abortion law where we're criminalizing doctors. I mean, this is massively historical to have an election the year after Roe v. Wade with the trigger law that we have. And it seemed like everyone was scared to touch the topic. I was often at every point like discouraged for coming out strong on this issue. I mean, someone had told Sean at the beginning that, oh, this isn't polling very well. Like, don't worry about it. And the only reason I know that is because I did hear Dr. Wilson say that. And he stopped saying that when people asked him about his stance on women's choice. I didn't feel like it was the party representing a progressive voice. I feel like it was like just kind of general consulting, business as usual. I don't know. We have so much that we can do. And that's just what I want to stay focused on. Gwen Collins Greenup must be our new Secretary of State. She is the woman that would make sure that the Secretary of State could focus on increasing voter turnout and taking our website away from this archaic, unusable, platform. And Justin Granger is the progressive treasurer that we need to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a $2 billion deficit, and Lindsay Cheek is absolutely the Attorney General that will keep Jeff Landry accountable. And I don't know what kind of messaging we need to put out to Louisiana to wake up, but we have to vote. I also wonder about the legality of the number of sports events that happened on the election day. I mean, who the hell, is that legal? Can you have 2 HBCU homecoming games, the all white, but I'm sorry, like the bastion of white education, LSU's game and the Saints game? Like, how in the hell was that the election day? And they'll point and say, well, people had time to early vote, but it just seems insidious. And we all just kind of sat back and were like, well, I guess that's it. But that mattered. Anyway, I'm trying not to be discouraged. I'm mad as hell. I'm going to run for a DSCC position just for the sheer petty purpose of getting Katie Bernhardt out of there. And so that'll be my next endeavor.
Go for it.
But I'll stop rambling now, and thank you all. Okay.
Next, do we have any questions? Well, I see Miss Watkins. I see Miss Watkins had her hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
No, I had come in late and I'm so sorry. And I appreciate you all for having me. The only thing I wanted to say is, and I've been saying this, I know for more than 15 years now, it's all about $1. That's the only thing that's killing us.
Yes, ma'am.
It's $1. It's $1. We've got to get together. We got to put our heads together. We got to come to a strategic point to where you're going to have naysayers and you're going to have one that's got to go back and tell everybody what's going on. But you set up things just right, we can pull it off as a nation of people trying to change the environment that we live in to make this world a better place.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Running out. Thank you.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, now I have a question. Do anybody else have a question though before I ask my question? I have a question. Okay, Miss Lane. Okay, my question is, Miss Brent, she brought up a good point that I was thinking about. Who in the H-E-L-L, I did not say the word, I spelled it out. what state will have major games on the same day of election? What state will have that? You ain't no such thing that they're gonna go and early vote. Ain't no such thing you're gonna go and early vote. Majority of the people will wait to that election day. So why did us as organizations, the Democratic Party, the Independent Party, why didn't we do the same thing that the Republican Party did? Why we didn't push it? The Republican Party pushed it, right? Christians, me, you, should have pushed it because it's our livelihood. We did not do that. So why did nobody did not blow the horn, ring the bell, said no, tell them colleges, no, we're not having no game. Why the Saints having a game? Or go to the legislator and move the date of the election. And where you at? Mr. Brown, Miss Brown, Britt, somebody, that's one of
Hey
my
y'all,
first-
it's Lindsay Cheek. Hey y'all, it's Lindsay
Okay,
Cheek. How are
Okay,
y'all?
Miss Lindsay. Oh, Miss Lindsay, you want to say anything about the results of the election?
Yes, I mean, turnout was dismal, right? But
Yes.
we have got to keep people engaged, right? Because guess what? There are 3 of us still in a runoff, right?
Yes.
And so all is not lost, y'all. Myself, Dustin, and Gwen, and even friends like Britt, we're all pooling together. We're going to be all over the state. The results were beyond disappointing. It's terrifying, honestly. But it ain't over yet, y'all. We need people to turn out even more than they did for the primary, right?
Yes.
Especially Orleans Parish. Like what the
Don't say it.
you know,
Don't say it. Don't say it. We
Yeah,
feel you. Don't say it. Don't say it.
yeah, I don't have to say it. But I'm here for y'all, and so is Dustin, so is Gwen. We are ready for the runoff. We've been making a plan the last 24 hours. All we've been doing is figuring out where we're going to be and how we're going to be together so that people will show up and they get to meet us, get to know us. If there's anywhere that y'all think we should be or go, this is our whole life for the next 4.5 weeks. Okay. Getting out the vote out across the entire state.
Thank you, Lindsay.
This is crucial, right? Like,
Yes, right.
we cannot have
We can't have no repeat. We can't have no
No, we
repeat. Lindsay.
cannot have a repeat, and inspiring voters to turn out. That's our job now. That's my job. That's Dustin's job. That's Gwen's job. And I need y'all's help. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And thank y'all. I think y'all probably voted for me. So thank you so much for getting me here. I appreciate y'all.
No, we
And Britt,
appreciate you,
you've made-
Lindsay.
Would you do a special investigation into putting all those games on one?
Oh yeah,
day?
like
Would do
that
some
was set up
survey?
that was set up a long time ago. Yeah, that of course it was. Having the Southern game, the Grambling game, homecoming games on the same day.
Yes. Okay, wait a minute. Somebody. Unmute. Unmute. Yeah.
That was
Okay.
that was on purpose. Of course it was, and it worked out.
Yes, it worked out. They're right
Yeah,
there.
of course it did. It worked out perfectly because unfortunately, Republicans are very proactive and we are generally reactive. And it needs to be the other way around. We need to be the ones looking ahead into the future and not sitting around and being like, oh no, we have an election day on the same day as all of our HBCUs homecoming games, right?
Yes.
And when half the state's leaving on buses on Friday to go to Houston for the Saints game. I wonder who paid for that.
And
Yeah.
I want to chime in real quick on that because
Okay.
while we're looking at what happened, what was the cause, why this could have happened, I know that's a real quick, easy. Why do they have all these games? Bear with me. October 12th, 2019, not LSU, Southern had a home game. October 12th, 2019, Grambling had a home game. October 13th, 2019, which would have been the Sunday after the election, same as this year, October 14th, The Saints had an away game in Jacksonville, Florida, which is maybe 2.5 hours further than Houston is from here.
Yeah.
And John Bell Edwards still won. The only difference was there was no at-home LSU game. So we got to figure something else out, y'all, because we got them.
Well, we're gonna be the proactive ones now,
Yeah.
okay? Because I'm gonna be next attorney general. My path has been laid. Louisiana is not gonna. Balance is crucial, right? And we've got to have both parties working together. We can't have a super majority of either, right?
That's right.
So I need voters to turn out, and I think they will. I think especially Democrats are going to be a little upset, and women, about what happened on Saturday, right?
Yes. Yes.
Are we not
Yes.
a little upset? Yeah. I'm
Oh,
still
a little
recovering from it.
upset. A little upset.
People keep telling me congratulations. I'm like, but again, I'm going to give the phone
Lane,
back
you
to Britt.
next.
I'm here, y'all. We're here. I promise you, we are going to be working our tails off for the next 4 to 5 weeks. Me, Gwen, and Dustin all together.
Thank you.
We're going to put the crowds out. We got a great team, local Louisiana team. Okay. Who's going to work with us. We got the media involved. And again, if there's anything y'all think of that we should be at or should do, let us know. Cause I mean, we're not politicians. I'm not a politician.
I have a
Neither are they.
suggestion. I have a suggestion.
Okay, wait a minute, Miss Leslie. We have Lane, then you next.
Okay, thank you.
This is kind of short. First of all, who actually sets the voting day? Who sets that? Is that the Secretary of State?
Secretary of State.
Secretary.
Gwen Collins.
Gwen's
Yeah.
going to be the next secretary.
We've got
We
to
have
make
2
Gwen.
women at the top.
Okay. And I'm gonna wait for my second question until after Leslie's had a chance to speak, because I want to hear what she has to say.
Okay, Miss Leslie.
Oh, thank you very much, and I appreciate that, Lane. I just had a suggestion. Tomorrow is National Night Out Against Crime. So they're going to be captive audiences, captive neighborhoods all over the city of New Orleans and probably the state, which would be great for the candidates to visit as many as they can, pass out their literature and still encourage residents and neighbors to go out and vote. So that was just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Miss Leslie. Okay, Lane.
There we go. Yeah, I guess the question is, now that people have been shocked, I guess my question is, well, so who is addressing the Black voters? I mean, I know there's a traditional sort of a church connection with, I don't know if it still exists, but for pastors to address their congregations, to urge them or exhort them to come out and vote. So my question is, where is this going to happen? And what I'm thinking about is something that Ta-Nehisi Coates, one of my favorite authors, was described and written about in passing, which is, and I didn't know about this, and I don't know whether it's true for y'all, but he says that there's something that every Black child is taught by their parents, and that is, you don't bring your fights in front of white people. And I'm kind of worried that if that's the case, if that really is an operative principle, that it's going to make it hard for people to call out the Black vote. I mean, listen, we've got to call out the white vote. We've got to call out all of the vote, but I wanted to raise that. It's a difficult question, but I want to raise it. So anybody who can speak.
Okay, I know for a fact, I'm texting her now, trying to find out, can she jump on right quick? The Black Voters Matters of Louisiana, we are having an emergency meeting Wednesday. So the NAACP and the Black Voter Matters, we are connecting Wednesday. And that's all I can tell you from now, for right now, but we listen to someone else question and comments. See, can I get her on this Zoom to answer your question, Lane? Okay, Peter, come on, Peter. Your time.
All right, well, okay, so the first thing is when you talk about low voter turnout, I don't think that getting upset with people who didn't vote is the answer to fixing that. If you want, and if is the Black voter turnout a little disappointing? Sure. But I think what's more disappointing is that 85% of white people in Louisiana continue to vote for psychopaths. So I mean, that's more discouraging to me. When we're talking about something like Raymond had up there, knocking on doors and reaching voters, and the numbers are there. I think we honestly need to come to grips with the fact that the numbers aren't there. That if 100% of Louisiana voters turned out, we would see a similar results. And so again, when I talk about the long-term hope of reimagining how we do these things and what politics looks like, I think we need to, I hear, for instance, one of the things that frustrates me is people say, oh, we have more registered Democrats than Republicans in Louisiana, which is true, technically, although that's about to change. A lot of those are Democrats who only vote for Republicans. They're Dixiecrats. They're people who just never change their voter registration. So that, it's not like there's a whole bunch of these like liberal-minded Democrats just not voting. Now, I, again, don't think that this is necessarily, I think, first of all, if we're ever going to get through to the other side and change this, we just have to be real about where we are. And so that's just, I hope, I know it doesn't sound, incredibly inspiring what I was just saying, but I just think we have to be real before we ever come up with an effective strategy for changing things. Raymond also mentioned something about, about messaging. So if I'm right, and I could be wrong, right? Like these are my opinions working in this business, what I see, I could definitely be wrong. What we have to think about is, why is that the case? Why is it so overwhelming? Obviously, to me, the core issue is racism. I think that that's something that we just have to be aware of, right? I mean, there are, whether it's explicitly self-aware racism or sort of just deep-seated unaware racism, it's so prevalent in America, in the world. I mean, xenophobia is a part of the human condition. Bigotry is part of the human condition, but in Louisiana, it is particularly acute and open and hostile. So what we have to think about, again, is sort of like, how do we take a different approach? And I don't have the answer, right? Like, I think that's what's exciting to me about this moment in time, is that, I'm questioning everything that I have done and thought and worked on over the past many years in this business. I hope that everybody else who's involved in this, whether it's just something they do as, I don't know, hobby is not the right word, but something they do is, on the side, or whether you do it like me professionally, I hope that if you're not reevaluating, then I think there's something, you're missing something. There are so many different ways to approach it, so many different possible ways to do things differently. And I think part of it is how we talk, what we talk about, how we talk about it. There's politics have become so nationalized. So, part of the problem we have here is that if you look at these districts or statewide and you ask, that you do polling and it says, would you vote for a generic Republican or a generic Democrat? No name, no background. The generic Republican does win, but a lot of that is because people have now just kind of thought, Biden, crime family, Obama, Democrat, and even if you're completely different than that, like Britt is not a, I mean, I don't know Britt all that well, but from what I've seen, I would not put her into just some sort of cardboard cutout category, right? And say, oh, she's just like this. So how do we speak to an audience that wants to hear, in Louisiana, an audience that wants to hear about a different vision, where we can separate ourselves from that nationalized version of politics? What do people actually want to hear? I mean, sometimes we have these ideas of what we want to hear or what we want to say, and it's not necessarily what voters writ large want to hear or how they want to hear it. So I think, and I don't mean this from just like a campaign consulting polling perspective. I mean, like, we need to figure out and go in and do deep work on what it is that people care about and what they want to hear about and how they want to hear about it. We have to learn from our opposition. You know, one of the things, as much as I, can't stand him personally and politically, Donald Trump does some things with communication that we should be able to learn from. The way that he connects with people, I don't think we should do it like him, right? I don't want us to be leading Klan rallies in the way that he does, but how is he connecting with people, and how are people who are sort of acting as mini Trumps connecting with people? What is it that's connecting them, right? What we saw, again, when I talk about these legislative races where these quote unquote more moderate Republicans got challenged by farther right folks who won, is that your traditional country club Republican is not speaking to their voters. So what is it? What's the anger and the grievance and the disaffected aspect that is driving a lot of these people? And how do we speak to them in a different way? Because they are voting against their own best interests for the most part, right? Or at least by the metrics, they're voting against their own best interests. Now, I think one of the big parts, and this is something I've learned more and more, is that, all right, I'm gonna try and tone it down, but it's just that there's just a lot of people who are jerks, and they just want the freedom to be jerks, and they want somebody who can even give them the encouragement to be their jerkiest self. Now, I'm not saying we should talk, we should become jerks, right? But what is it that's driving that? Is there a way that we can we redirect that jerkiness from being pointed toward Black folks, immigrants, and is there a way that we can maybe make a connection to saying it's not actually these people who corporate interests have turned you on? It's not Black folks, it's not immigrants, it's not communist, Democrat, demon blood drinking, whatever. It's actually those wealthy corporate interests who are keeping you down. That's who you should be angry at. I mean, if people are angry, you can't necessarily stop them from being angry. It's about where is that anger directed? So again, I don't have I'm really just thinking out loud here because I'm also in a time of self-reflection, trying to think about what we've done right, what we've done wrong, what our opponents are doing right, what they're doing wrong. So a lot of this is, again, I'm spitballing out loud in a lot of ways, but I think that's what we should all be doing right now. While keeping our eyes on the prize, knowing that, yes, that in 5 weeks, we have another election and a chance to make a difference. And maybe some of those things that we're spitballing, we can try them over these next 5 weeks.
Thank you.
But just not get caught in doing things the same old way or following a playbook.
Yeah, we have to change now, Peter. We have to change. Okay, now I reached out to Amara, the Black Voters Matters leader in Louisiana. We're gonna ask Amara to speak on where do we go from here, the results of the election after Jeff. Jeff, I will ask my leader of Black Voters Matter, Amara, to speak after Jeff. Thank you for joining us, Amara. We really appreciate you. Mr. Jeff?
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I'm actually on the highway on the way back.
Mr. Jeff, we can't understand you. Mr. Jeff, Mr. Jeff, we can't hear you. We can't. You breaking up real bad, Mr. Jeff.
If he would perhaps.
So while Mr. Jeff get in a clear area, Miss Amara, can you come on? The question was by Miss Lane. Miss Lane, can you explain to Miss Amara about your question and how can the Blacks or the whites or the Asians, it doesn't matter. We just need to make a change. Can you explain your question, please?
The question is just simply who can, and maybe using new ideas, as Peter was just saying, but who can direct or call out and call up voters, Black voters, white voters, That's really the broader question. How can we rally? What are the sources of rallying voices? That's really the question.
Okay, I think I got it. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm actually on another call right now at the same time, but when Miss Valerie reached out to me, I said I had to come so I could weigh in. But I do want to first say that we are also in a time of reflection and really trying to analyze, in terms from the Black Voters Matter perspective, as well as our grassroots partners, like where we went right and where we went wrong. But what I can say is that we were on the road a lot. We did a lot of tours. We did a lot of engagement around voter education and working to make connections between the issues and the ballot, as much as we could within the C3 space, because that's the space that we operate in majority of the time. But what we're kind of landing on is we need, of course, an all hands on deck approach to reaching out to direct voter contact. We were able to do some good direct voter contact, but we definitely need more. And what we're also calling for our grassroots partners to do is to get more molecular about the outreach and doing precinct level outreach. So like really looking at the numbers where we had an increase on the precinct level, leaning into that, but also having a team of partners across coalitions and across the state that are leaning into phone banking and canvassing a couple of rounds. Like Peter said, we can test some things out during this 5 weeks, like doing a couple or a few rounds of canvassing and phone banking to those who in precinct areas where we really need to amp it up. We need more visibility. We need more sign waving. We need more phone banking, canvassing, of course. We need more voter education. So whether that be in person at events or within institutions like our churches and our community centers that are already holding functions in space, of doing some real education about the ballot. Like we need more, and like we need that tenfold. And just like really understand what is the message that reaches people, and having our authentic messengers and our grassroots organizational partners like Ms. Valerie and the NAACP in New Orleans and the Lower Ninth Ward, and from the top to the bottom, like the folks that people already trust, getting. And I guess like another point is the resources, because we're being outspent, and so how can we get more resources to get more people on the ground doing direct voter contact and having the conversation about the implications? And I think our opportunity moving into November 18th is the Secretary of State, the State Treasurer, our Attorney General, that can serve as a buffer between what we're about to walk into. And like the fight is not over just because Jeff is in there. Oh no, we got 3 other opportunities. And so how can we, take what we've learned, get molecular about it, get you all as our coalition partners to adapt 10, 15, 20, whatever your capacity is, number of precincts to really lean in there. So that's my thinking, and I hope it helps.
Thank you, Ms. Amara. Yes, that's helped. That helped out a lot. Thank you for stepping in here for a few minutes. We know you got to go and jump off of this and go to your other meeting, but we really appreciate that. And please let us know. Please let us know where you all need our help, because more voices, more people, more power. So we thank you for that. Next we have Jeff. Did Jeff get back on?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right. Thank you guys. I'm actually on the highway on the way back from Houston. A group of us went to the Saints game. We all early voted to make sure that, our voices would be heard. I'm a little disappointed in, frankly, some of the analysis that I'm hearing here today. I will say this blame the Black voter narrative is really problematic for me. I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, when I did an analysis, I see Lindsey Cheek and I see Dustin Granger made the runoff, and I see Sean Wilson did not. And so when a quick analysis to me shows that white Dems voted for Lindsey Cheek and Dustin Granger and did not vote for Sean Wilson. So race is a big part of what happened on Saturday. And until we come to grips with that, I don't think we're going to be honest with ourselves. I think the reality is this. Also, we had now, I will say this about Sean Wilson's campaign. It was underfunded. It didn't have the bandwidth that I think it needed to be as successful as it could have been. But talking about the votes that were cast, and so because it was underfunded and didn't have the proper bandwidth, I think you saw part of the low voter turnout. But to blame Black people for that, I think is problematic on lots of different levels. I just don't think that's the reality, because when we talk about the votes that were in fact cast, white Democrats abandoned Sean Wilson at a rate that pushed him out of the runoff. And so when you compare their activity, you look at, there were in fact more votes cast. Some of them didn't vote for any gubernatorial candidate. Some of them voted for Republicans. But they also cast their votes for Lindsey Cheek and Dustin Granger. So race is a real factor in what we saw on Saturday. And so, but I do think also when we talk about flawed campaigns, you know, when we talk about reaching out as a owner of Black-owned media, none of these candidates, by and large, spent any money in the Black community. None of them advertised on Black radio. They didn't advertise on in the Louisiana Weekly, the New Orleans Tribune, Think 504. And so when you talk about low Black turnout, when you don't engage the platforms that directly interact with Black people, then you get low turnout. And so these campaigns need to look in the mirror and not blame Black voters, but in fact look at the way they in fact ran their campaigns. So that to me is significant and something that, as we talk about how we address it and do better and move forward, these campaigns need to interact with Black-owned media. They need to engage Black-owned media with advertising dollars, and then they can reach the Black community, motivate them and inform them to go out and vote. So that is, to me, the biggest thing that happened when I do a quick analysis. As we get more information, again, I'm on the highway and, you know, haven't done a deep dive, but I did last night look at the available information, and that was stark, shocking, and most disappointing to me. So when we want to talk about this, let's not blame Black voters. Let's not blame Black vote low turnout. That's when we look at the actual turnout that happened. White Democrats abandoned Sean Wilson. That's a fact. You look at the numbers and it bears that to be the reality. So I just want to put that out there and all the stuff that we've been talking about today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Do anybody else have any more comments? Feedback off of what Jeff just said?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of, some of the things that I was jotting down that I wanted to say, he kind of went into them. Because one of the questions was about how to reach voters, you know, maybe Black voters or whatever. You gotta go to sources those that people trust, and he's exactly right. You know, and of course funding could be an issue. I get that the Democratic Party didn't do what Republicans were able to do, but the reality was that, you know, these candidates whose base is, you know, substantially filled with Black voters did very little to reach out to Black voters through those avenues that Black voters interact with on a regular basis, the newspapers and the radio stations that they trust. I also wanted to point out, you know, that no, it cannot be blamed. The idea that Black voter apathy is the reason. Absolutely not the reason. And again, I don't particularly care to use the word apathy, but I've talked to enough people to know that there is, and this could be the case among white voters as well, there's just such a lack of distrust and a lack of understanding and connection, which goes back to what others were saying, helping people to make that connection between this ballot, what happens at City Hall, in Baton Rouge, in the Beltway, and your life, what this actually means for you. So that goes to the importance of voter education and really helping people to connect those dots. And then finally, again, to kind of reiterate what others have said, we cannot discount the impact of race and racism on this election. And how we figure that out, y'all, I don't know. But we cannot discount how race and racism impacted the outcome of this election. There were people who did not vote for Sean Wilson on Saturday that voted for John Bel Edwards 4 years early. And I had the fortune of meeting with John Bel Edwards one-on-one for an interview. 4 years earlier, I had a one-on-one interview with Governor John Bel Edwards. Not to discount either of those individuals and their platforms and what they stood for or stand for, but I could close my eyes and listen to the things that either man said and could not tell you which one I was talking to if my eyes were closed. You understand what I'm saying? Platforms, ideas, the direction that Sean Wilson spent almost as much time on the campaign trail simply talking about how he was going to continue the efforts of John Bel Edwards as he did setting out his own platform. They were so similar that, bottom line, if you couldn't vote for Sean Wilson in 2023 and you voted for John Bel Edwards 4 years ago, you can't tell me race wasn't the reason. So we've got to understand that, and we've got to make that connection. And somehow, as a state of people, as if you're truly progressive, if you're truly a Democrat, you know, they used to call it yellow dog Democrat. Democrat would vote for a yellow dog if it was on the ballot. Well, Democrats need to start voting for Black folks when they're on the ballot. You know, we got to get beyond that.
Can I follow up on what Anitra was saying? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, next we have Mama, we have Majama, you'll be next, Jamalia. Okay, come on, Peter.
Yeah, I think when to both Jeff's point and Anitra's point, it's not just talking to Black folks and really all people, but talking to them in from sources that they trust, right? Which was not happening, and I think that's a really good point to be made. It's how candidates, parties, and even the nonprofit advocacy world are talking to Black folks. I think there was this period of often white people, but also Black-led organizations talking to Black voters saying basically vote or die, right? Like Donald Trump's gonna kill y'all. Every vote was the end of the world. And it had an impact. I don't want to, there were some good turnout numbers in a short period of time, but you can't just do that over and over and over again, especially when, for the most part, people survive. I don't want to say that everybody does, right? Like there were people who were deeply harmed during that time, but most people make it through and they say, well, I voted and it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, and I'm still here. And when you come back with kind of a similar message, it just doesn't resonate, and you just can't do that over and over again and expect to have an impact. And so, and then, I think Beth has an interesting point in the chat, using issues that all races care about. I think what we might, and again, I'm just spitballing here, I'm not trying to present these as definite solutions, but I do think maybe there is this way that we're even talking about on this call. Black voters and white voters, and this is something that happens in Louisiana, it happens nationally, again, it happens internationally. How do we talk in a language that is us, all of us? What is good for all of us? How do we all come together? What are the issues? You know, Beth mentioned minimum wage. I got into this working on minimum wage. It is a deeply important issue to me. I think it could be, I think it's one of the most important, if not the most important levers for racial and economic justice. What I have started to find, especially as over the past few years, is that people don't care about that issue that much. It really is not a moving issue. Or people broadly agree that we should raise the minimum wage, but on their list of priorities, it's quite a ways down. And so we have continued to talk about minimum wage, where 6-8 years ago, it really was, because of inflation, because of a tight job market, even people in very low wage jobs are making above minimum wage. It's just not something that is resonating with people as much. So, and again, I'm not trying to present these as like guaranteed, I know I'm right. I'm just trying to talk about what I'm seeing and hearing, traveling the state, talking and listening to people, that I tried to use that message. It didn't resonate all that much. What are the issues that Black voters and white voters care about? And how do we talk to people maybe in a more inclusive way, where we're not separating necessarily, but there's always going to be an aspect of, you know, obviously we're talking about, you know, racial separation in some way, shape or form that seems to be, you know, but how do we limit that? How do we bridge the gap? How do we talk about it as all of us together? I think that might be something, so that it isn't an issue, a situation where after an election, we're doing a debrief and we're saying, well, Black voters did this and white voters did this, and it's Black voters' fault for not turning out, or it's white voters' fault for voting for psychopaths. You know, like we're having this kind of very binary discussion. I think maybe we need to rethink that message and the way that we're connecting with people or trying to connect with people. The fear-based, if you don't vote the right way, you're gonna die, is not working anymore. I don't want to discount that it didn't have a decent impact for a few years there, because it did. But I don't see it happening anymore. What's the next iteration of that messaging and that organizing? Because I mean, those two things go hand in hand, right? It's not just finding the right message, finding the right outlets for that message. It's, you know, connecting with people on a personal level, building relationships, and trying to put that message and those ideas deeply into people. That is something that our opponents have done a really effective job of, which is that they have found some messaging that they know works with their base, and they hammer away on it over and over and over and over again, and they tend to stay on message. And while they do have internal fights over, you know, between moderate and far right or whatever it might be, they tend to come back together around some shared messages and shared ideas. Now we are, you know, on the other side, something of a big tent, and it's going to be harder for us to do that. But how do we maybe move to having a little bit more of a cohesive, all of us, we, and what is good for us, whether you're white or Black or middle class or lower middle class, or even wealthier. I mean, I think one of the things that we often, you know, is that even people who benefit from the system as it is could actually be living in a better world and even benefiting more in a better system. So, I mean, how do we connect people? Because we are trying to bring together a lot of different groups.
Yeah. Hey, Peter, what you think about this? What you think about this here? Then answer this question after Majama speak. I noticed Trump, I noticed Obama, especially Obama, they appeal to our emotions. They appeal to us personally, because it was out there in the streets. They had people that boots on the ground that fed them information, and they went to the powerhouse that's on the ground. The ones who have the big mouths, the ones who speak up in the community, the ones who speak up in the neighborhood, in the churches, and they appeal to our emotions. And when you speak to a person that speak from their emotions, speak from their hearts, other people gonna listen, because that person speak to that person's heart. Then it is like a domino effect. So think on that right there, where I go to Mama Jama, Jamala.
We'll fix that for you, Valerie.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I just noticed that when it came up, it picked up part of my email address. But this is Mama Jamila. And I want to thank Peter and Jeff because that is the thing. I tried to get in earlier because part of my comment on where was the vote of the Black church? Being not the representative of the Black church, but a member of a Black church. That era is gone. No longer do sheep in the pasture follow the voice of one person who many times from those from outside of the Black church came in and made a request for a block vote. Block votes now come from issues. So I appreciate Peter's comment. I appreciate Jeff's comment. Issues. I voted against Jeff, not for Sean. What were his campaign promises? I encouraged those I know and I knew to vote against Jeff and in that case for Sean.
Recording in progress.
As Peter said, we no longer get our message out. We have this belief that we actually have a Black vote that will blindly follow through the pasture. And we don't, as Democrats, and I'm saying Democrats, but in Democrats, independents, whatever we might be, Republicans, the liberal side of these issues do not toot their own horns. We allow those on the other side to make loud noises about how wonderful they are, what they're going to do, what's going to happen if you don't vote for them. And we either are reactionary or completely passive. We do not get out and toot our own horns. And it is getting increasingly harder to get young voters to fall into the pasture because they will not be led like sheep. They want to know why. They want to know what you're going to do. How is it going to affect me day to day? And we are forgetting the messages that we need to put out. And we are going to continue to lose not only the Black vote, but any vote that looks like it could be of a stance that will make this city, state, country, and world a better and more equitable place for all of us.
Thank you. Oh, that was very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Next, we have Miss Betty. Oh, I appreciate that. You calm me down, Mama Jamila. You calm me down a little bit. Thank you. Miss Betty.
Yeah, thanks, Val. Mama Jamila hit it right on the head, actually, because Britt Gandolfi, who was just on the call, is a young friend of mine who used to live in New Orleans, but she lives on the North Shore now. And reaching out, she ran as a Democrat, and she spoke very openly about her life and an abortion she had when she was a young person. And getting to there was not enough money. I think Britt probably spent about $35,000, guys, that begging to get money to run. So we're talking about a lot of money in these races. And the Democratic Party, she asked the Senate Democratic Caucus, they've got a $500,000 budget, they've a balance, and she asked them for $5,000 and they turned her down. Told her that they were putting the money into statewide races. And listening to Jeff and all of you talk about the fact that they weren't putting money into Sean Wilson's race, like I guess I assumed that they were, kind of explains why everything went sideways. But the other question that I want to ask Anitra and Peter and Jeff too, they're still here. I had a friend run in District 9, which is mostly a Jefferson district. She lives in Orleans. And one of the things I found out early on when I started calling my friends who are political people in Orleans, I found out real quickly that my Democratic friend, Marianne Machat, was not going to get any backing at all from any elected senator in Orleans Parish because Cameron Henry is the head of appropriations, Senate appropriations, and they don't want to lose his money. They got money from him. And so it's really disgusting to me. And I wanted to, I mean, am I that naive that I think Democrats should support Democratic candidates and not keep their mouths shut because they want to make sure that they keep getting money from the Senate Appropriations Committee? Tell me how stupid I am that I think that they should back Democratic candidates. I'm not understanding what's happening. So anybody that can throw some light on this will be helpful.
Well,
Go ahead, Peter.
oh no, you go first.
Well, I was just gonna say your naivety does not make you wrong. That is probably a very real circumstance. Doesn't I think one of the biggest things that could be done to kind of not expose, because people know, but we got to keep talking about it. Like we got to call these things out. I'll just use as an example, and let me preface before I say anything else. We endorsed the other candidate in the state representative district 91. That was the paper endorsement, not necessarily my personal choice. And here's why. The candidate that actually won, and it's a good thing, in my personal opinion, was a Democrat. The candidate that was her main opposition in the race was another Democrat who got the party's endorsement. And the reasoning was that she'll work with, and this is simplified, she'll work well with Republicans. She'll be the person that we need to compromise, to get things done. And of course, don't get me wrong, I understand politics. I've covered it for a long time. Sometimes compromise is necessary. But do I necessarily want someone who is going to always make the deal or always, concede something, especially if that's something that's being conceded is against my best interest? Sometimes I think I want someone who's going to go in and fight for me, stand their ground, even if they have to come back empty-handed. They didn't just lay down and die. And that is why I appreciate the result of that particular race and was actually hoping that it would go that way. And so with that said, I think the most important thing we could do, because it does happen, it is real. People make, strange bedfellows? And when we see it, we have to call it out, And here's one of the things that I guess as a journalist, as an observer, that I've seen over and over again, we can say a million times, I can lay out a legislator's voting record. This is what they did. This is what they voted for. This is how it was against your best interest. And voters will go back to the polls and reelect that same person again and again and again. And so for me, again, it's just about how do we really help people understand and make the connection that just because this person is an elected representative doesn't mean they're right, doesn't mean they know everything, doesn't mean they're always working in your best interest. Understand what's right for you and how the politics and the policies are not necessarily the same thing. So I don't know. And again, I don't have all the answers, but we got to call these people out.
I actually want to build right on top of what Anitra is saying, because I think there were 2 points. I know we're coming to the end, and there are 2 points that I want to make that Anitra basically said. Maybe I'm going to make them in kind of a different way, but similar ideas. Is first of all, something I learned in politics is that when you see an elected official and you like them or don't like them or anywhere in between, you see them saying or doing things that you like or don't like or in between, and you're wondering why did they say or do that or how do they act that way? Go visit their district. They're almost always representing their district. If you see a crazy right-wing person, go visit their district. They're usually Mandy Landry. It was silly to challenge her. She represents her district. She's in her district likes her. To the Marianne Mushat versus Cameron Henry race, Betty, I understand your point. I understand your frustration. Cameron Henry represents that district. There's a reason he won by 40 points, and there's a reason why everybody knew he was going to win by 40 points. So part of it goes back to redistricting and the way that the districts are drawn, and that the way you draw districts determines who you're going to have, because people elect people who they feel like reflects them. And so that brings me to my final point, and it goes back to Valerie's question, is that, and it kind of talks about what Anitra was talking about in connecting policies and politics, and what Mama Jamila was talking about. People don't vote on policy. People don't know anything about policy. People don't tend to care that much about policy. And I'm not saying that. That's highly educated, highly engaged people who think of themselves as real politicos don't vote on policy. People vote, politics moves on, for lack of a better term, vibes. And so Valerie made the point about Obama and Trump and how they appealed to people in an emotional way. Too often more so with liberal politicians than conservatives, although sometimes, they lean into the policy as if you're going to lay out an agenda, and people are going, oh yes, well, I realize that that'll make me better off and that one won't. That's not how people work. It's not how people, it's an emotional, I don't want to say game, I feel like that trivializes it, but it's an emotion thing. You have to, that is, and again, when we talk about learning from our opponents and their messaging, they don't sit there and say, I believe in, this policy and that policy. They say, build the wall. And people are like, yeah, I don't like immigrants. They're coming and taking my, that appeals to people. It's not a viable policy. It doesn't, and Mexico's going to pay for it. That makes absolutely no sense, but it appealed to millions of people. Yes, we can, I believe in hope. That's not a policy agenda. It was a wonderful talking point from a gifted speaker and leader. And that was what energized people. And so, I think Sean Wilson was an excellent candidate as a policy political nerd. I think he did actually lay out a pretty solid agenda, and he had some really good things to say. And he was by far the most qualified candidate, and he would have been the best leader of a giant bureaucracy of the candidates. But he is not a sexy candidate. He is not somebody who is going to generate heat. And so when we think about, again, when we're talking about, or at least when I'm talking about reimagining politics and how people go about it and trying to brainstorm new ideas and new approaches, I think that's something we also have to come to grips with, is that I know that we say we want to hear a policy. I say it too. I want to hear what your policy is, but ultimately that's not what moves people. And so if you want to get those policies enacted, you have to have a policy agenda. People who don't, I'm not going to take you seriously, but you can't lead with that if you want to be effective. You have to figure out how to appeal to people and connect with people. And there's some people who can do it naturally. I mean, again, Obama was a brilliant guy. He had a very detailed policy agenda, and knew the issues inside and out. That's not what he talked about. That's not what he led with. And so, when people look back and they're like, oh, he was a Harvard, lawyer, and he was all these brilliant things, which he was. But that's not why he won. And that's not why he was able to win, a second term, and why he was able to govern with something of a mandate. It's because he connected with people. And so part of it is also when you look at your candidates, it's not just who's the smartest or who can connect with people. That was one of the tough things with Sean Wilson's campaign. If you got in a room with him, he was very personable and warm. And to Anitra's point, when she interviewed him, you saw a lot of the same things, but he wasn't captivating. He didn't have the kind of charisma. It's the same reason why initially people were afraid, oh, Stephen Waguespack is running for governor. He might, if you've ever met Stephen Waguespack, I know Stephen Waguespack. I was never worried about him winning that election. I was almost surprised that he got 5%. That guy has the charisma of a wet paper bag. The fact that he looked in a mirror and thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna get hundreds of thousands of people to vote for me for governor, shows that he didn't have the judgment to be the governor. So, Landry is an idiot. I mean, I've seen him, I know him, I've seen him talk. He can't string together more than 3 or 4 sentences, but he's got an everyman charisma to him that appeals to a certain set of voters that people connect with. They're like, I can't string together 3 or 4 sentences either. This guy represents me. You know, I mean, like there's a thing that it works. So, you know, you got to think about that as part of it. You know, going back to the Mandy Landry race, she has a type of charisma that appeals to District 91. It would not appeal to Senate District 9. So that's just, you know, I guess, again, I went on a bit longer than I intended to here, but we got vibes matter in election time, at least. Vibes really, really matter. And we have to just wake up to that and understand that and accept that, in my opinion.
Thank you. We want to thank, matter of fact, before we close out, do we have any candidates online now would like to speak? No. Or do we have any announcement? Please put your announcement in the chat. Please add your announcement in the chat and we will add it to our eBlessed and our social media, please.
And for silver lining, Valerie, to make you feel better, Danny Engelberg put this in the chat before he left. Leon Roche won the criminal district court. That was a good one. Yeah. He's a good guy. He'll be a good judge. He'll be better than his opponent would have been. It wasn't all bad. There's something. So, you know, we were all looking for something to feel better about. There's something.
Thank you.
Purple Nice Rube. Purple Nice Rube.
Oh, you had to throw that out there. So, do anyone else have an announcement you put in the chat? The NAACP, I have one. The NAACP gonna have our breast cancer event October the 27th, Friday at New Orleans East Hospital from 12 to 2. We will send out an e-blast on that also. Then my takeaway is, please have this as a takeaway. For us to make a change, we have to start in our home, in our neighborhood, in our community. Meet our family members, our friends right there where they at. Meet them right there where they at. If they talking playground, don't start talking about a robbery. Meet them talking about the playground. Then you move them to the next level. But to get a person attention, we have to be on the same level they are. Let's think about that. We thank our guests for coming tonight. We appreciate you all for keeping up with the politics and keeping up us up in the know with the politics. We thank you. We appreciate you. If I'm missing anything else, Lane, Betty, Arissa, no, I'm missing nothing else. So we're gonna end with we thank VP. VP, you wanna close us out? Okay, we're gonna end with a like Jeff always said, with a peaceful spirit. We thank you, Lord God, for giving us this opportunity to air out our feelings, to have a listening ear for how we can improve our neighborhood by electing the person that you allow to be in. We pray, Lord God, Jesus, for the person that you allow to be in. We pray that, Lord God, that they do the job accordingly to your word. We ask all these blessings in your name, Lord. Bless us with peace and harmony. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you, guys. And guess what? Yeah. We had 12 people shared in 12 groups. So this will be spread out in Louisiana. So thank everybody for sharing.
Thank you, Anitra, Peter, and Jeff.
Thank you. Good night.